This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
On Wednesday, May 8th, nurse Dina Carlisle got an email from her colleagues at Ascension Providence Rochester Hospital in Rochester, Michigan. They wanted her to know there'd been a cyber attack.
I had a very sick feeling.
Dina is president of the local nurses union, OPEIU 40, which represents more than 300 nurses at Providence Rochester. And suddenly, all those nurses were plunged back into the 1980s. With no electronic charts or computer prescriptions, they were writing things on paper and faxing them back and forth.
To have no electronic medical record is very sobering. I mean, my stomach flipped when I heard this.
Can you tell me what the nurses there kind of describe their days as right now?
Stressful, very, very stressful. And the challenge is very real. You're rebuilding a patient's chart with the questions you have to ask. One of them stated to me, every time I come in, the process is different. It's chaos from the beginning of my shift.
Ascension, which runs Providence Rochester Hospital, is one of the largest private systems in the country, with 140 hospitals across 19 states and in Washington, D.C. We now know that the company was hit by a ransomware attack, but there's still no timeline for when Ascension systems will be restored.
It gives me a very deep sense of fear about how much we rely as a profession on this electronic medical record system. And I just am not sure how corporation is going to safeguard that. And that is really, really frightening to me as a registered nurse.
Dina's not wrong to worry. Already this year, attacks have taken down Ascension and Change Healthcare, a subsidiary of United Healthcare. And last year saw the largest number of healthcare hacks on record, more than 700 separate incidents. So today on the show, why does this keep happening? Hospitals are not a new target for cybercriminals. Why are they still so unprepared? I'm Lizzie O'Leary, and you're listening to What Next TBD, a show about technology, power, and how the future will be determined. Stick around. Reboot your credit card with Apple Card, the only credit card designed for iPhone. It gives you up to 3% daily cash back on every purchase. Plus, Apple Card has no fees, not even hidden ones. Apply for Apple Card now in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Subject to credit approval. Variable APRs for Apple Card range from 19.24% to 29.49% based on creditworthiness. Rates as of February 1st, 2024. Terms and more at applecard.com. Reboot your credit card with Apple Card, the only credit card designed for iPhone. It gives you up to 3% daily cash back on every purchase. Plus, Apple Card has no fees, not even hidden ones. Apply for Apple Card now in the Wallet app on iPhone. Apple Card issued by Goldman Sachs Bank USA, Salt Lake City branch. Subject to credit approval. Variable APRs for Apple Card range from 19.24% to 29.49% based on creditworthiness. Rates as of February 1st, 2024. Terms and more at applecard.com. It seems that Ascension knew pretty quickly that its system was the victim of a major attack. By May 9th, the day after the hack began, the company was telling reporters that it had hired an outside firm and reported the incident to, quote, the appropriate authorities. I asked Justin Sherman, the CEO of cybersecurity firm Global Cyber Strategies, how quickly most victims of a cyber attack realize what's happening.
It might take a couple days. It might take a couple weeks for an organization that has a data breach to notice that something's missing. But with a ransomware attack, you're going to notice right away.
Because they're asking for money.
Exactly. Because they're asking for money. There's someone banging on the digital door saying, hand over hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in cryptocurrency, or we're going to wreck your systems. You're going to have to replace all these computers. We're going to sell your data on the dark web. So it's extortion, right, is the business model for these ransomware groups. So how does this happen? Usually this is via phishing. So someone will get an email that looks legit. Maybe a doctor thinks they're opening a medical file PDF, or a nurse thinks they're clicking on a scheduling link. That's how the hackers will get in. Computers literally many times will be locked down. There will be, a doomsday looking black or red screen up where you can't click, you can't exit, you can't deactivate. And it has a ransom demand on there with instructions for how to submit payment. So it's usually pretty stark visual and demand when you're dealing with a ransomware incident.
So they're getting communication from the perpetrator, in other words.
Exactly. The hackers will directly communicate with the victims.
You've spent a lot of time looking at various perpetrators of ransomware attacks. What do we know about who might be behind this one?
There is suspicion in this case that the ransomware group is a group called Black Basta, B-A-S-T-A. And there are a lot of ransomware criminal groups around the world who make this their business model. They might target an insurance firm. They might target a hospital. And so what we know about Black Basta is this is a ransomware group that's been in operation about 2 years now, and they're believed to be based out of Russia. And in particular, they have a penchant for going after hospitals and healthcare systems. And like we're getting at, there's a lot of reasons for that, but the need to continue business is first and foremost, right? If they take down a library, maybe the library has more of a willingness to wait 6 weeks to get the system back online.
Even if it's the British library, which was hacked.
Exactly, even if it's the British library. But if it's a hospital, I don't really care what size you are, where you are, right? There's that immediate, very real need we need to take care of patients. We need to have surgeries and operations running. We can't wait. And there's a greater sometimes tendency to then just pay off these criminals.
When the United Healthcare subsidiary Change Healthcare was hacked back in February, the company paid a $22 million ransom in Bitcoin to its attackers. But patient data still ended up on the internet, something cyber gangs can extort their victims for in a whole new way.
Double extortion, as the FBI calls it, and I think that's a great term for what's going on here, is it's not just extortion at the first phase, right? So you want your system back, pay us off. It's a hacking group will do that. They'll take a payoff from that organization. And then after they get paid the first time, then they'll say, well, we also stole all your data. And yeah, I'm glad you paid up front to get your computer working again. But unless you want all this health information to suddenly appear on the dark web, you're going to have to fork over some additional cash for us not to do that. So they're realizing, I think, both the value of people's medical information, and these are businesses, right? These are criminal groups who are trying to make as much money as possible. And so they've realized with healthcare, we can tack on this additional revenue stream by extorting people to not leak the health information.
As you have alluded, a thing that is so striking here is that this just keeps happening. Hospitals, healthcare systems keep getting hacked, keep having ransomware attacks. Why?
Structurally, hospitals might use outdated systems, or if they're getting new systems, which they probably should, right? They're going to focus on getting new MRI machines or new imaging software, right? It's not necessarily going to be, we need to overhaul the security of our scheduler, or we need to make sure that, an external facing portal is the most robust thing. So there's often legacy software. And the second main reason I would say is that when we get, as an individual, that software update alert, we all roll our eyes, right? Like, no, I do not want to update my Mac in the middle of answering email, right? But it's fine if we put it aside at night and it updates overnight. Different story with a hospital. So there's often real legitimate challenges and hesitancy to patch and update software sometimes, or they're just slower to do it because you can't say, oh, we're just going to shut down, the patient portal for 2 hours, or, oh, we're going to deactivate this medical database for 2 hours so someone can patch it. There are surgeries, there are tests going on. So there really are a lot of unique challenges, I think, that an organization like that faces with cybersecurity.
There's no unified set of cybersecurity laws or standards for healthcare providers or hospitals. There are some rules, from the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, which you probably know as HIPAA, but they're mostly about safeguarding patient data and making different health systems work together. Plus, they're from 1996.
There was a general vibe of, wow, look at all these electronic health records. We really have to figure out how to make them interoperable between two hospitals, and not about, hey, there's going to be a group that calls itself Black Basta in Russia that's going to hack in and shut down a hospital and, ask for 25 million in Bitcoin, right? That wasn't even a thing. So there are a lot of challenges that the law has not kept up with.
I'm just thinking back to the CEO of United Healthcare getting hauled in front of Congress to talk about the Change Healthcare hacks. Do you think this spate of attacks is going to turn up the heat on healthcare systems to maybe do a better job here?
In an ideal world, yes. In reality, probably not. There was a study done on all of the data breaches that were reported to HHS, Health and Human Services, last year in the US. And they totaled 725, which was the most that have ever been counted in 1 year. Under that category, there's lots of other kinds of health breaches that are not even counted there. But under that category, that's the most they've ever had. Before, over 124 million health records were compromised across those attacks. So it's really a staggering frequency of information. Disaster is probably a better word for it. And so, yes, there are certainly hospitals that are investing in security. And again, we can't expect perfection, right? Like if the Defense Department's going to get hacked, a hospital is not going to completely stop a hack either. But at the end of the day, a lot of these hospitals just don't have the incentive. They don't think about this until it happens. And there's all kinds of complexities that get well outside my area around insurance, and will insurance firms cover breaches, and how much does that cost? So it's really a complex problem, and the incentives for better security need to be stronger.
And yet patients are the ones, and actually the people who work at the hospitals as well, who are left suffering. I mean, reports out of Michigan, this is from the Detroit Free Press, where there were providers at Extension Hospital saying medical orders for lab work, imaging tests, and prescriptions were being written on paper and faxed to other parts of the hospital. One nurse basically told the Free Press, don't come here unless you are out of other options. That is just a catastrophic mess.
It's terrible. And this is a case where the effects of a cyber attack directly impact people's health and safety, right? We can, talk in theory about cyber war, this or that kind of idea. But when it comes to targeting a hospital and doing that level of disruption where people can't access care, you're faxing documents. I mean, we're in 2024. We've seen this in a bunch of other attacks as well. There was major disruption in the United Healthcare incident. There was an attack a few months prior in Canada where hundreds of, I think it was pharmacies were shut down and people couldn't get their prescriptions. I mean, the list goes on where targeting a hospital directly hurts people. It hurts the people getting care, but it also impacts doctors and nurses and other medical professionals who already are undervalued in this country. So all of that to say, we can see why there's such a big reason and incentive to pay off the hackers, because you really don't, as a hospital, want people to get hurt or even die or whatever it might be because of the attack. But at the same time, this is not going to stop happening until we really are proactive about the problem.
When we come back, why patients could be dealing with the fallout from these attacks for years.
In 1978, gay people in California faced a dire threat.
Proposition 6, the Briggs Initiative.
The teaching profession is riddled with the homosexual element.
John Briggs is going to fire every gay and lesbian school teacher in the state of California.
I'm Christina Cauterucci. This season on Slow Burn, we'll explore how a nationwide backlash against gays and lesbians led to a massive showdown in California.
This was tens of thousands of pissed off gay guys and lesbians roaring down Market Street.
With so much at stake, young people became activists.
We've got to fight back. We can't let this happen in California.
And activists became leaders.
My name is Harvey Milk, and I'm here to recruit you.
Slow Burn, Season 9, Gays Against Briggs. Out now, wherever you listen.
Extension is now being sued by patients for this disruption in service. And I'm just thinking, like, beyond the awful chaos that you and I are talking about, what else are patients vulnerable to as a result of a ransomware attack? You know, are they going to find that 2 years from now, their data has been sold down the line by like a group of shady data brokers?
It's entirely possible that, and I think quite likely, that people whose data are taken in this kind of attack are targeted with a scam at some point related to their medical information. Or, yes, there's a sketchy company who grabbed that off a website somewhere and now has piled it into a database for sale. And this is part 2 of 3 of kind of the levels of impact on patients in our country, right? So the first is the disruption, of course, and the second is that theft of health information, right? You might have information in there that's leaked, that's incredibly stigmatized. So this could be, maybe you're suffering from a mental health condition, maybe you're suffering from HIV, right? And these are not things that should be treated this way socially, but they're stigmatized in our country. Yeah. Or now criminalized, right? So this could be a reproductive health procedure that now, you know, right-wing governments and things are criminalizing across the country, trans healthcare, so on, right? So there's a stigma and a risk piece to the person. And there's also scams. If a hacker knows that you have a medical condition and you think, oh, well, only my doctor knows that, you're much more likely to click on that phishing link. And the third is the general issue of what we're spending this podcast talking about, which is questioning trust in the health system and questioning, can these hospitals keep my data safe? Is my health information protected? If I talk to my doctor, is that going to get leaked on the internet by a hacker 6 months later? So there really are a lot of ways that at the end of the day, yes, this harms the hospitals. This is bad for business. It impacts insurance providers. But the real victims in these scenarios are the patients and the medical professionals.
Well, that was kind of my next question, is what this does to already pretty fractured trust in our healthcare system.
It's not good. There is this level of disruption to systems. It really prompts a couple of things. One is that the inclination is to blame the hospital. Sometimes it very much is the organization's responsibility in part that they were hacked. And sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's you did everything you could and, you know, an advanced Russian group spent 8 weeks trying to get it and they managed to do it, right? So, but there's this inclination to blame the hospitals. You get class action lawsuits, you get regulatory filings, you get bad press, you get angry patients who maybe are not, you know, willing to go back to the hospital. And there's also this general feeling that we don't have cybersecurity, that my data is always out there, that it contributes to this cynical view that nothing's going to change. All this stuff's hacked. There's no hope.
Why bother?
Why bother? My data's out there, right? So all of that is snowballed when you have these news stories about these ransomware attacks against hospital after hospital after hospital.
So the obvious next question is there a way to keep this from happening, or a movement at the national level by regulators, the big insurance players, the big hospital systems, the American Hospital Association, any of these folks, because it's not good for them either.
It's bad for business. It's especially bad for business when you're dragged in front of Congress and yelled at for hours on national television. I'd say a few things. One is that the Biden administration has been spending a fair amount of time thinking about ransomware specifically. So lots going on with cybersecurity generally, but in particular thinking about ransomware as a unique problem because of this disruptive effect that organizations, whether it's an energy grid, which is another great target example, or a library or a school or a hospital, is forced to shut down operations, that's really disruptive. So there's been a fair amount of activity internationally working with other governments on, hey, if we know some of these groups are based in Eastern Europe, can we get at them? Can we start to be proactive about disrupting those groups? And then also working domestically with organizations on ways to get at the problem. And the second thing I'll say is thinking more about health security and data protection as a holistic issue. And we're just talking about hospitals today. And there are a variety of other apps and services and other technologies that are not even subject to any of the few regulations we've mentioned. That's a telehealth service like BetterHelp. That's fertility tracking
Period
apps.
tracking apps, yes.
Absolutely. Flow Health and Premom, and we can name many others who have sold and shared data to advertisers and data brokers and information on depressed LGBTQ plus teens or women who are trying to get pregnant and all these horrible things. So that's not obviously the same as like this Russian ransomware problem, but I say that because it's adjacent. It's part of this overall lack of attention to how our health data and technology landscape has evolved. And it's come very far. I mean, in some ways, maybe it hasn't. People are reverting back to fax machines, but on the whole, it's come pretty far since 1996. And so we really just have to think more about how do we update our overall laws and regulations to capture these new technologies.
Justin Sherman, thank you so much for coming on and for talking with me.
Thanks for having me.
Justin Sherman is CEO of Global Cyber Strategies and an adjunct professor at Duke University. Dina Carlisle is president of OPEIU 40. And that is it for our show today. What Next TBD is produced by Evan Campbell, Patrick Fort, and Shayna Roth. Our show is edited by Paige Osborne. Alicia Montgomery is vice president of audio for Slate, and TBD is part of the larger What Next family. And if you like what you heard today, the best way to support our work is to join Slate Plus. Just head on over to slate.com/whatnextplus to sign up. All right, we'll be back next week with more episodes. I'm Lizzie O'Leary. Thanks for listening.
McDonald's presents Burger Reviews by Hamburglar. Today's review, the hotter, juicier classic burgers. Mr. Hamburglar. Rubble, rubble. He said, of all the McDonald's burgers I've ever hamburgled, these are the hottest, juiciest, and tastiest. Rubble.
Hamburglary is on the rise. Get caught with a medium double cheeseburger meal for $6. Price and participation may vary. Promotion pricing may be lower than meal price. Comparison to prior classic burgers.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.